let me start us, and we'll hope a few more people join. The opening, I wanted to just thank everyone who got involved in contacting the council and the mayor about Lot J. Happy. Several people sent me copies of these amazing letters they wrote, and in a few cases of the interesting responses that they got. We definitely got people's attention, and we were certainly not alone in that. And I'm grateful to Council President Huzuri for squashing it temporarily, and it's just key to keep the pressure up. I think probably most of you who've lived here longer already knew about our JACs. I have been really impressed with the role they're taking in this. And if you don't know them, they're the ones who played a big role in scotching the JEA deal and are now once again stepping up to really take this on. So if you don't follow them regularly, I recommend signing up for their emails because they send out useful bulletins, and I'll pass them on as I get them. But I'm also trying to dial back a little bit on the BAM emails to everyone, since it's clear everybody's exhausted and ready for the end of the year. So if you want your own source, I really strongly recommend them. And another topic of interest for everyone is COVID. And Nancy Stotts has been a key player in the Doctors Fighting COVID group and is going to give us a quick update on what they're doing and how we can support that.
I'm going to share my screen now. Just by way of a very, very brief background, in case you weren't aware who Doctors Fighting COVID is. So there's 8 of us on the board, most of us in this local Jacksonville area. We sent a letter to Mayor Curry back in June asking for a mask mandate. There were about 500 Jacksonville area physicians who signed it, which is a pretty sizable number. It so happened that, 2 days after that hit the press, he did put forth a mask mandate, although they said that it had nothing to do with it. But there was a lot of press coverage. We then sent this letter to Governor DeSantis in July, shortly after our mask mandate was instituted, asking basically for the same thing: face masks, banning indoor gatherings, etc., signed by a few more people in addition to our board. And kind of amazingly, and I'm just going to scroll slowly through here, but we have over 1,250 signatures. I've checked this for duplicates. And as you can see, nearly when we ask for the signature, we request that it be only MD or DO, a physician. So if we had opened this up to healthcare providers, we certainly would have gotten a higher number. But it's an extremely impressive number, I think, and gives us a little bit of credibility and standing when we go out there kind of talking about the subject. So that's our background. We met today at noon with Mayor Ellen Glasser and Mayor Dan Gelder from Miami Beach. And we are planning to do a conference together on Wednesday of next week. It's going to be by Zoom. It's going to have hopefully a handful of mayors and, at least dozens of physicians. And we are going to address, hopefully, we spent so much time talking about a mask mandate, that we need this mask mandate from on high, from Governor DeSantis. And it's finally kicking in that he is never going to do this. And so what we're trying to do is ally with mayors and really appeal to people to do the right thing, at least through the holidays and into January and through, the worst of the winter. And then things will get better. But for the next 60 days, we're basically just imploring them and trying to get the mayors, who are very, very interested in this as well. If you think about public health is about health and public, and we have to all be kind of rowing together to really be successful. What the data show us is there's about 25% of the population in general who refuse these sorts of suggestions. I fear it's higher than that in Florida due to the political, connotations with this. So where something like seatbelts might have had a 25% refusal rate, I think this has more like a 30, 40, maybe even 50% refusal for wearing masks. So our goal is just to cut into those folks who are borderline, who would be willing, to change their ways, even temporarily. We are asking a mother of a young COVID victim to speak to us. And we have invited the press, and we do hope to get some traction with this. But it's very frustrating because in addition to the governor's unwillingness to give us the mandate, he's in September, you probably are aware, he put forth another rule that stripped local mayors from their power to enforce any of their ordinances. So Mayor Glasser has issued 0 citations for non-mask compliance. And, it looks like DeSantis is just going to keep issuing them. The other thing that came out of our conference today, which I thought was interesting, and maybe bounce it off you all and see what you think, is they suggested bringing in law enforcement because I presented this data from the statistics from the Officer Down Memorial page. There's 2 main sources of data, and they use different timelines, so the numbers don't mesh exactly. One uses the calendar year and one goes June to June, but they both basically come out with the same fact, which is out of 278 total, what they call LODDs, which are line of duty deaths, 163 are from COVID, which is 59%. And the other organization basically, they're saying the same thing, that COVID is set to be the highest cause of law enforcement officer deaths in the first 6 months of 2020. So, it so aggravates me when I see support the blue, back the blue line this. And if you want to support law enforcement, fire, first responders, wear your mask.
Mhm.
Please reconsider gatherings. 80% of transmissions are now occurring within family members. And it's doubly heartbreaking because sometimes multiple family members succumb to the illness. So it's really tough. And yet some people get it and have very mild symptoms. It's true. It's just very difficult to predict who is going to be in that boat. So really, there's at this point not a lot to ask. We had considered inviting politicians to try and get their support, but we again came to the sad realization that in this state at this time, it's unlikely we're going to get strong support from Republicans, although there's a representative, Mike Caruso from South Florida, who recently came out in favor of a statewide mandate. Things are worse in the South, so they're more likely to be on board with this than they are here. And as far as what we're seeing in the hospitals, it's a slow, steady rise. It's not like the spike we saw last time. It's slow and steady, but the numbers are definitely going in the wrong direction. And what's most troubling to us as physicians is there's a lot of people who just don't even believe that it exists or is at least a serious health threat. So that's why we think it's worth our time and energy to try and do something like this before the holiday and try and convince even a small number of people to change. So that's basically what we're doing. And if you all have suggestions, ideas, contacts of mayors, I'm reaching out to the mayor of Pensacola. I've already contacted. He's been very upset about this ordinance. And actually that's a very Republican line. Local control is something that a lot of these mayors are very upset about. So that, coupling that message with our message of masks, I think, doesn't make the governor look very good.
Mhm.
So,
But so at this point, other than sending you ideas for people to contact and writing angry letters to the editor, is there is there anything more we can do now?
I guess, the only thought I have is in trying to address the issue where you run into someone who's not wearing a mask. What do you do?
Hmm.
Depending on where you are, and again, I'm open to thoughts and ideas. I carry around some cheap ones and have offered them to people, and sometimes they take them. A lot of times they just say, and walk away or whatever. I do notice it's a lot of times people who may not have the means to buy masks. They're riding their bicycle to the grocery store and they don't have money to buy masks. So I give them one. And just maybe having the conversation with your family members who don't appreciate that visiting someone older could be really dangerous.
Mhm.
Reinforcing that is helpful. And finally, just trying to educate, trying to tell them, hey, did you know we're losing a lot of police officers? I see, you're pro police, which is fine. That's great. We're losing a lot to COVID. Did you know that?
Mhm.
A lot of corrections officers. And so any frontline worker is going through pretty much hell right now, and anything we can do to just ease their burden is helpful. So that's really all I have. It's not a big ask, it's more of just a report what we're doing. And
Mhm.
we had thought about doing a demonstration because someone said, oh, we need a photo op, a bunch of doctors standing maybe in front of a cemetery. And while that would be impactful, we, after thinking about it and talking about it, we just felt it was really against our message to
Yeah.
gather at all. So we canceled that.
Yep. Well, thank you. And thank you for the work you guys are doing. To people, if questions, it's a small enough group, you don't need to do anything special. Just raise your hand and say something if you want.
Um, Thanks so much for all the hard work you're doing, Nancy. And I think it's really paying off. I noticed in our neighborhood, we're close to the beach. And when I was coming home from doing some shopping today, there are two women wearing their masks. My neighbor, who is an emergency room doctor, she's out walking her dog. She never wears a mask when, she's outside. She's wearing a mask. This is serious. This is really, really serious. And I think we all have to realize that. And I think, maybe we could get signs made as far as protect the police, wear a mask. And then, or I don't know, you could even have something, a little, wear a little sticker, protect people, wear your mask. But if it's the police, people won't listen.
Right. I'm
You
going to
can
try
use-
and get a couple, if anybody knows a police officer who would be willing to just comment for 30 seconds about that, they would really appreciate if everybody wore a mask. I think, at the conference, I think it would be powerful.
Mhm.
What about the Blue Lives Matter? Wear your mask.
Yeah.
That's a Blue Lives Matter has been thrown around for quite a while now.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
ironic that
Yeah,
We could change its focus
Yeah.
excellent.
to wearing
Excellent.
mask.
or if you're pro-life, wear a mask.
There you go. I really like that one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you. The other thing we touched on a bit before everyone got here, so I'll just run back over it quickly. A lot of folks are doing what they can with the Georgia runoffs. I'm sending out information and we're updating the Get Involved page on the website as often as we get new ideas about things people can do. Starting Monday, early voting begins there. And so the focus now is clearly just on getting out the vote. And there are letter writing, phone banking efforts going on. And the other thing we've recently just this week gotten contacted about is that Georgia Voter Protection is hoping once again to recruit help from Florida for dealing with vote curing. And I'm sure there will be phone banks set up. They're not in gear yet, but what they are doing is offering training for any of us who did in-person vote curing here and would be willing to do it in South Georgia. I did just a little bit of that at the end of our election. Judy and I ran up into South Georgia one day. As the numbers on COVID go higher, of course, it's harder to get excited about that. But if it interests you at all, they're doing training tomorrow night and Saturday night. And the information about that is, again, on the website. And I sent it in today's email. But if you can't find any of that, obviously ping me or shoot me a thing in the chat box now, and I'll give you that information. I'm going to take the training just to find out more about the differences. Everyone says Georgia is slightly more permissive, but I don't know what that means. So I'm going to find out. The only thing I know for sure is that one cure that's available in Georgia that wasn't here is if someone's ballot has been rejected, but during early voting, but they go and vote in person. If there was a signature issue, they can just go and vote. But in terms of the affidavit system that we use here in Florida, I think it's pretty similar.
That's what I was going to say, is that they can cure it just by voting on election day, which is probably the simplest thing. I wonder if they can use people. I agree with you. It's a little sketchy to be going up there in person, but to just reach out to the people who've been rejected so they know they need to go and vote in person.
The difficulty is that a whole lot of the people who were rejected don't have phone numbers that work. And that's why we ended up, we drove 2 hours to see 3 people in Hinesville, Georgia. And we were outdoors and it was, I think, reasonably safe. But I wouldn't even ride with somebody now. And so it's its own thing. So this brings us to the more detailed substance of the meeting tonight. 3 of our folks have collaborated to pull together wonderful information about the election, and I'm turning it over to them. Carol, you want to start us off?
Yes. Let's see if I can get us going here. Can everybody see my screen and hear me? Everything good, Elizabeth?
I don't see your screen yet. I can hear you.
Okay, let's see what's wrong. How about now?
Yes.
Okay. Whoops. I can get it from the beginning. Okay, good evening, everyone. Steve Herder, John Weldon, and I are going to tag team a brief recap of what happened with the 2020 election. And I think you all know John and I. For those of you who don't know Steve, he's our partner and friend from the Beaches Democratic Club, and Steve's reputation is well known during elections because he's the master of all things signs. So all these signs Steve has made and organized wonderful sign waving. But in addition to that expertise, he also did a great job looking at in detail at some of the voting on the beach, which we're going to share with you quickly tonight. So the first couple of slides were actually produced by the Duval Dems, and Kim Glasgow is the the statistician whiz that helped really do support the data-driven work that was done in Duval. That I think everybody will agree was very successful. So we are Blueval for the first time since 1972, which is pretty amazing. And we can all take a little credit for that. But we had about 496,000 people vote in Duval County, just under a 75% turnout rate. And you can see that Biden squeezed past Trump, largely because of almost a $25,000 vote swing compared to what happened in 2016. These are countywide numbers. So based on the work of the Duval Dems and organizing a coalition of groups like BAM and Indivisible and the Women's March, and now all these progressive groups came together and really developed a strategy at the beginning of the campaign. And frankly, it worked. And they had a number of different strategies that were implemented around increasing voter registration, which was done very successfully. The Dems now outnumber the Republicans by 39,000 plus votes because of voter registration drives that were done. Massive work around engaging and increasing the number of vote by mail ballots that were requested. You can see a 400% increase compared with the prior election. And vote by mail had an incredible turnout. More than 90% of the ballots requested were returned with vote by mail. And where it really came into play was in the targeting of the warm and cold and new Democrats. And you can see from this slide the difference that vote by mail made. The blue lines are the turnout when vote by mail was used in those various categories. And the red is what the turnout looked like in 2020 when people did not use vote by mail. So it's a pretty dramatic impact of the work around vote by mail. I think most of us were involved in some kind of outreach, massive things around text messaging, lit drops, phone banks, postcardings. And again, that coalition was successful in reaching, since the primary in August, over 110,000 low propensity voters. So those are voters that don't normally or routinely vote or vote sporadically in elections. Again, massive effort that many of us participated in. And I'm pleased to report that actually, based on the Duval Dems data, 75% of the low propensity voters were actually contacted in District 13 on the beach. So once again, I think that the collaboration and the organization and kind of the data-driven strategies, plus a whole bunch of dedicated volunteers really had an impact on the election. So what happened at the beach? This is a picture or a map of the precinct results. And you can see there's the green is the swath of Biden and the red is the ring of Trump. And unfortunately, there is not too much green at the beach. In fact, there is no green at the beach. And so we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into that tonight. We had over 39,000 votes cast on the beach this year. It's about a 4,000 vote increase since 2016. Our turnout exceeded the turnout countywide. Remember, countywide, it was about 75%. We were 79%. It was higher than the turnout in the last presidential election. We have some big voters in terms of precincts at the beach. Adele Grage exceeded an 86% turnout. You can see the Hampton Inn, which is there in Marsh Landing, was 86%, and Bethlehem Lutheran in Jack's Beach was over 85%. The graph shows you what the voting pattern looks like in this election compared to the prior 2016 elections. And not surprisingly, we had a big increase in vote by mail. That was the biggest difference. A little bit of an increase in early voting and significantly less election day voting. I'm going to turn it over now to Steve Herder, who's going to share some data he put together on kind of our behavior at the beach and what it looked like at the precinct level. So welcome, Steve.
Hi, everyone. I did want to thank Carol Brady for inviting me to participate in tonight's Zoom, as well as for her help with the sign waving events that we held prior to the election. I've been out on the street for the beach's election since the late 1990s, and this year has been the best ever, thanks to all the support from people like Carol, John Weldon, and the whole Beaches activist community. But Beaches District 13 consists of Jacksonville Beach, Neptune Beach, Atlantic Beach, and Mayport. In addition of the 15 precincts that make up District 13, we have one on the west side of the Intracoastal, Precinct 1313, which basically runs along San Pablo. Many people do not realize that out here at the beaches, there are nearly 2 Republicans for every Democrat. The pie chart shows in blue that 28% of registered voters prior to the 2020 general election were Democrats. In orange, that 47% were Republicans. The gray area, which is labeled Indy and others, is 25%. And consists of no party affiliation, Green Party, Libertarians, Independence Party, and all the other minor parties that are out there. The numbers of all registered voters has increased since the 2016 election. And the good news is that the Republican market share has decreased 5 points from 52% to 47%. Democrats have picked up about 2% of the Republican loss, with the NPAs, Indies, and others taking the other 3 to 4%. If we look at the next slide, we have party registration broken down by the 15 beaches precincts. The first precinct, which is my precinct, the Benny Furlong Senior Center, is kind of typical of most beaches precincts in that the orange line representing Republicans is twice as long as the blue line representing Democrats. The gray Indian others line is similar to and slightly shorter than the blue Democratic line. Precinct 1312, the Oceanside Church west of Mayport Road, the 4th from the bottom of the page. Oceanside Church is the only one here at the beach where the pie would be divided about equally into thirds. Although the huge 1315 USO on Mayport Road at the very bottom of the list is only slightly weighted in the Republicans' favor by voter registration. Third from the bottom, Precinct 1313, which is the one west of the Intracoastal known as Rivertown Church, has the most Republicans of any at the beach. The orange line shoots all the way out to 2,500 Republican voters. Its demographics skew older, whiter, less diverse than other precincts. On the next slide, this is the key races. We see the results of the voting at the beaches. We're only showing the 4 races where all the precincts voted. We excluded the soil and water from this and didn't include any of the beaches mayor, city council, or city commission's races to keep this table a little bit manageable. All this information is available on the Supervisor of Elections website for anyone who's interested, and it's fairly easy to find and fairly easy to review. From the previous pie chart, we know that the beaches voted red, so it's no surprise that Trump won every one of the 15 precincts. The shaded areas on the table represent the precincts with the closest results. 1306 Atlantic Beach City Hall, 1308 Community Presbyterian, 1312 the Oceanside Church west of Mayport Road. In the case of minimum wage, the shading represents, that's the columns on the right, the shading represents those voting in favor of the majority, greater than 50%. I'm going to stay on this page for a minute and point out a few interesting results. Trump with 22,705 only got 2 more votes than Rutherford with 22,703 in the entire District 13. Deegan with 15,000, leave it on the chart for a second.
Okay.
I'll just keep that as a summary. I'm basically going to say everything that's on that next slide, and then we'll just keep that for reference. But Deegan with 15,979 got 84 more votes than Biden with 15,895 in the entire District 13. If you look at the precinct results for the Rivertown Church, the third from the bottom, Trump with 2,512 only got 1 more vote than Rutherford with 2,511. And Biden with 1,055 got only 2 less votes than Donna Deegan with 1,057. With Donna being such a great candidate, how is it that this voting tracked so incredibly close? This is a rhetorical question that I don't have an answer for you. You would have thought with all the goodwill Donna had built within our community, many more Republicans would have voted for the best candidate. Donna did beat Rutherford at the Oceanside Church on Atlantic Beach by 22 votes, the only precinct she won at the beach. She did win about half the precincts in Riverside City Council District 14, and she won a few precincts on the south side. Despite all the flags you saw in the back of pickup trucks, you would have thought Trump would get the most votes of any Republican at the beach, but in fact, Jody Phillips got the most votes, 23,729. Great campaigning by Josh Hicks kept Cord Bird in second place with 23,347 votes, followed by Trump with 22,705. Both Phillips and Bird also beat Rutherford, and Phillips and Bird also got a higher vote count at every single precinct than Trump in Rutherford. The rhetorical question here is, do Republicans know how to vote down ballot or what? Or why did voters like Biden and Donna, but not like Josh Hicks and Jimmy Midyett? Rivertown Church not only turned out for Trump and Rutherford, but they had the lowest approval for the minimum wage at 40.94%. And the 5 Atlantic Beach polling locations favored Trump at 7,007 votes with or 53% to Biden with 6,190 votes or 47%. But more than half of the vote deficit, 466 of the 866 votes came from one poll location, the USO on Mayport Road. This poll also had the highest approval for the minimum wage, 59.38%, but oddly supported Republicans at a couple of percentage points higher than their registration numbers would predict. This precinct is demographically younger and more diverse than others at the beach, but also had among the lowest turnout of the beach's polls. Some of these numbers aren't shown on this table. And on the next page, I kind of summarized some of the comments I just made. But in conclusion, the voting data gives us kind of a glimpse of what's happening at the precinct level here at the beach and may offer some ideas on things to work on in the future.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve. So I'm going to turn it over now to John, because this is what a comparison of the federal races, presidential and congressional races in 2020 and 2016. So he has some observations on that to share with us. John?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me, Carol?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Good. Great. My part of this is really just a short bird's eye view of the federal races, as Carol points out. It's discouraging at the beach's precincts that there is such a strong Republican turnout and such a strong Republican bloc, frankly, which we have been unable to effectively dislodge. I got interested in looking at these numbers some time ago when Rory Diamond came to speak at BAM, and he made reference to these numbers from 2016 when he justified a lot of his Republican perspectives. He basically said that his district was 65% Trump voters in 2016, and therefore he had essentially a mandate to pursue Republican policy goals and objectives. I went to the supervisor of elections to double check that, and he was wrong. In 2016, Trump won 59.2%, which, while it's a discouraging number, it's still substantially less than 2/3, which is what Mr. Diamond was claiming. In 2016, Trump defeated Hillary Clinton substantially. It was, if you look at the numbers, you have to assume that many people, including almost 6% of NPAs, which are write-ins and third-party people, almost 6% chose to vote for somebody else because neither Trump nor Clinton were acceptable to them. In 2020, the Democratic candidate Joe Biden did much better. He, as has been pointed out by Steve and others, he increased his margin by more than 5% over Hillary Clinton's performance. Both the Republicans and the Democrats at the beaches in 2020 had very good turnouts. They had, all-time award-winning turnouts. The Democrats had about 1,760 more voters in the 2020 election than they did in the 2016 election, and the Republicans had 1,203 more voters. So while the percentages can seem a little skewed towards the Democrats improving their turnout, frankly, the numbers are relatively similar. That said, is there another slide, Carol? We look at the Rutherford-Deegan race compared to the Rutherford-Bruderly race that occurred in 2016. And you can see that Donna, because of her charisma and her hard work and her, long service in this community, did significantly better than Bruderly. But at the beaches, it's just an almost impossible climb. When a candidate like Donna Deegan, and frankly, for that matter, a candidate like Josh Hicks, cannot do better than 40 to 41% against old school, stodgy, non-performing Republican incumbents, we have a problem. And that's how I'd like to summarize this presentation from my perspective. And that is, as a group, BAM needs to spend time and put our heads together and try to come up with a long-term strategy for changing this 2 Republicans for every Democrat at the beach. Carol and I have started talking about ideas like continuing our social media efforts, and we have to find other means of outreach, because as long as the numbers continue the way that they are, it's going to be difficult to convince qualified candidates to throw themselves into the meat grinder. So if anybody has any suggestions going forward, we welcome those. And I'm sorry to be the bearer of the least exciting news tonight.
So this is glass half empty, glass half full. And as John and Steve both pointed out, we had a big increase in Democrats coming out to vote compared to the percentage increase in Republicans. The unfortunate thing is that we're starting in the hole. And as John said, that 19% increase, which is 3 times as much as the Republicans' 6.45%, is about the same amount of people. But, again, half full. We definitely worked hard, and I think made some marginal gains in both the number of Democrats that were registered to vote and their turnout. So I have to embrace the Stacey Abrams philosophy, which is, I'm sure Georgia looked like this or worse when she started her outreach. We need to grow our pie. And I think we showed that by working together and rolling up our sleeves, we could have some impact. It just wasn't as much as we'd hoped this go round. So Happy to take any questions and appreciate John and Steve jumping in as well.
I have sort of a comment question. Granted, you know, the numbers are what they are at the beaches. I think I know for me and hopefully for most of the people here, if Florida had gone for Biden, I would have been much happier, and it would bode well for our governor's race and so on. And I can't help but keep thinking about the returning citizens in this state, which number in the 700,000 to 900,000 at least, who should be eligible voters who are being disenfranchised by our governor and the Republican Party. And that difference would have changed the outcome for the state. And, you know, I just feel that should be one of our priorities.
It's a great point, and I completely agree. That and going after our young people, and clearly doing a better job of educating Democrats in the down ballot races. We may have to go back to handing out more slate cards than we thought. Other questions or thoughts?
I mean, we made some great progress, and it seems like things are moving along. But it would be interesting if we could get further demographics to determine where did we make our progress, and what demographics did we make our progress? You know, is it, you know, a change in, you know, the makeup of the population from age, or what is it? So that we have some targets to go after in the future.
Thinking.
And what about independents? Do we know what percentage? Are they also 2-to-1 voting Republican?
I don't think we know for sure. The conventional wisdom going into 2020 was that, at least in this area, and I think broadly in Florida, they tended to break sort of 2/3 Republican, 1/3 Democratic. There was early polling this fall that suggested it was more like a 50-50 split, at least in terms of what people were saying they were going to do. But of course, those were the same polls that we imagined were going to give us a much cleaner Biden victory and the Senate. So it's hard to know how much to trust that. Some of the groups, I think it was Mandarin and Riverside Indivisible, both did some early experiments, and the Blue Wave folks did some early efforts to reach out in January and February to independents to talk about registering them so they could participate in the primaries this year, since it was such a significant year, using that as a starting point. And for the most part, had their heads handed to them. There seems to be a very strong identification among at least a large subset of independents that they want to stay there. And that was when we could still go door to door, and they were knocking on doors, theoretically, of left-leaning NPAs, which is a fuzzy category that people were reaching by combining. We can't know actual voting data, fortunately, but they were combining things like magazine subscriptions. And, you know, if you were an NPA who takes The Nation, maybe, you know, I don't know all of the algorithms that had run to get those names, but it was not a very promising first effort. And I think what one piece of wisdom from the Georgia experience is, part of what makes a difference is you actually have to do really long-standing, detailed door-to-door canvassing, where first you just actually get to know people before you start trying to change their minds about things. You need to go ask them what they care about, and then you go back, 6 months later to talk about something more specific and tied to policy. It's a big job, but But Brian, I like your idea of trying to drill further into the demographics of who we did pick up and who we did turn out. I think we can learn more about. We may never have, I'd like to think we'll never have quite as terrifying a race motivating people to cast their vote. But we can learn more about who are the ones that showed up.
And we do still have a couple of precincts with low voter turnout, and they tend, as Steve said on the precinct map, the USO on Mayport Road and the other Mayport precincts still had, you know, less than a 50% turnout. I don't know how much of that is active duty, so that, you know, they're not even here to vote or didn't do vote by mail, but we still have some work to do there as well.
Yeah.
Has there been any analysis done as to what policies or issues that the Republicans were winning on, or particular issues that we have problems with our party?
I think there's an endless amount of brooding about all of this, but I haven't seen a lot of very data-driven stuff yet. I think it's probably early to know. Does anybody know
Yeah,
more?
and I don't know if we'll ever know at the beaches level. I mean, they're going to depend on interviews of polling outside the polling places, which I think all the pollsters are a little quiet and humble right now before they're releasing all of that stuff. But
fair enough.
No, I grant that one of the biggest problems is, of course, just party identification. And we got problems right there as far as trying to win. But if there's specific items that they were using effectively, we might want to look at those so that we might have some type of counter argument the next time we're faced with the election.
I refuse to drive a pickup truck with a flag, Ken. Sorry, not going to happen. I won't stoop that low. That's the only thing I could see that they were hawking.
Yeah, we did notice that if you had a big old pickup truck, you were most likely having a Trump flag and signs attached to it while we were out on the waving signs at the polling places.
Yeah, you know, I think we're missing the big picture is that Duval is blue, and that didn't happen without us. I mean, because we were everywhere. We were, you know, writing postcards, not just to the beaches. And, you know, I think we've got an uphill battle with where we are. I think that Nancy's right. We've got a lot of disenfranchised voters that would be ideal to work to get them to be able to vote. I mean, that's just like, you know, voter discrimination right there. So that's a huge block. And but I think we did great. And I just don't say, short of whenever anybody comes into your neighborhood, invite them to BAM.
Well,
give them a welcoming basket.
That's true. It ought to be there along with the beach towel or whatever. No, I agree with you. I think I'm really proud of the work that Carol mentioned it before. The First Coast Coalition, which really kind of had the legs kicked out from under it by COVID, had done some critical work last fall to really look at the strategy and try to identify, and it was quite ruthless. I mean, if it hadn't been for BAM, I'm not sure that Precinct 13 would have gotten the attention it did get. We were determined to work hard where we live, and I'm glad we did, and I'm happy for the incremental progress. But we always understood that winning this election meant motivating 94 other precincts ahead of ours, because we had a giant list that we carefully went through, and I think the DEC and the other members of the coalition and all of us deserve credit for sticking with that strategy. And we really once we couldn't go door to door, the phone banks and text banks really did matter, because we may have harassed many of those voters, but it worked and they did turn out. And some of those other precincts are always going to be more important to the Duval results. But John, to your point, we're never going to get rid of Rory Diamond and Cord Bird and some of the others that we'd love to lose without a better prospect for recruiting candidates to run.
Right. That's my concern, Rory Diamond in particular, because he's such a frustrating office holder in this community. And that has all changed in the last decade. When I was on the city council of Neptune Beach 10 years ago, people still really didn't pay as much attention to your party affiliation. I'm not going to say it didn't exist. You'd have to go back 20 years to get to where people really paid attention to the sort of agreed rule of local city councils, which is that party affiliation is not to be considered. They're all nonpartisan races. That's just gone by the wayside now. And I find that very frustrating. And basically it means that unless we can find other avenues of winning support for Democrats, we're going to be in the minority and not represented in a lot of the city council seats at the beaches or in Jacksonville for the foreseeable future. So again, it's not my pleasure to rain on the parade, but our objective as a progressive political group should be to figure out new and innovative ways to change that balance.
And that's a lot of what we'll be talking about in 2021. So everybody plan to come back. That's most of the substance of what we had. If anyone has a favorite fantasy of what Joe Biden's going to do on his first day in office, I would love to hear it, because I've been spending a lot of time comforting myself with those.
I've got a question which is more anxiety inducing, and I want to know whether electors can change their vote once they've been selected. Are you sure?
They're not supposed to be, and there have been court cases about this. Now, that's not to say people won't try this time around, but no. There's a reason.
So December the 12th is the real day, right? Is that when the electors meet?
14th.
14th.
14th. Okay.
14th. Yeah.
So we gotta stay on edge until that number comes in. That'll be an interesting outcome. My guess is that Trump and his acolytes are just going to keep rolling along with the "we won" argument, and that it was rigged, even after the Electoral College meets and confirms the election. And to me, it is the height of irresponsibility, and worse than irresponsibility. I find it almost, I hate to use this word because it sounds extreme, but treasonous.
Treasonous. It is. It is.
They're here.
Isn't there something, I'm sorry, on January 6th, where Congress has to confirm the Electoral College vote on the 14th?
Correct.
And at that point, something could change.
At that point, there
Not
could be
likely,
more
but-
ridiculousness, but they can't win this. He really did win, and there really is very clear legal language to rely on, and much of it actually in the original Constitution. I mean, it goes way back. So they're going to keep making noise, but actually this ludicrous Texas suit that they're trying to get to the Supremes, I read an interesting, you may have seen the same thing today. It is interesting in a way, they've actually abandoned any argument that there was fraud. It's like they gave up on that because they so patently can't prove it. This suit is all about how those states changed their laws so there could have been secret fraud that no one could see. That's the argument. That's what I mean, that's such crap. So even this court, I feel, is unlikely to take that one up. And I believe the electors are going to vote like they were frigging elected to vote. And the Congress will make a lot of noise and trouble and eventually say, oh, all right. And everyone who takes until that day to agree to that should be drummed out of office, but they won't be. It's my prediction.
Day one, Biden should change the locks on the White House.
No, he needs to thoroughly clean it.
Yeah, fumigate.
That's right.
Yeah, it needs to be fumigated.
Yeah,
Thanks.
fumigate
For
it with
more
lots of
reasons than one.
disinfectant.
One other thought, what another thing we should be probably thinking about is the governor's race in 2 years.
Oh, yes.
And is it Nikki Fried? Is that who's going for it, or?
Here's my vote.
Yeah, she would be a good one. I was thinking Val Demings is
Yeah.
a very dynamic Black woman doing a great job in Congress right now.
Remember, yeah, Rick Scott is, Marco Rubio is up, so she'd be good against him. She's my vote for him, but
Yeah.
Vicky?
No.
Val Deming.
Val
Oh,
Deming.
Val. Yeah, Val Deming spoke to a now state convention back, I guess in 2016 or 2017, and she was just impressive and dynamic, and I love her.
They say Gwen Graham is also planning to get back in again.
Oh, good.
She has name recognition.
Yeah.
She does.
For anybody who lived in Florida when her father was governor, which is about 10 of us. I know, I remember him too, but we're a different demographic.
Yeah. No, we definitely need a new governor.
Yeah, do you think that Trump would run for governor?
No.
Well, somebody sent me something that was sort of shocking. I don't know if it was a joke, but Trump is pushing for Ivanka to run for governor.
Oh, really?
Oh, they're moving down here.
I don't know if that's real or
Yeah.
fake news, but
I read something, I don't remember where, but yeah, that he was pushing Ivanka to run for governor. I read that someplace too.
They're moving to Atlantic Beach.
No, they're moving to Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, well, you know, he'd lose his good friend DeSantis.
They're moving to Miami.
Yeah.
Oh,
They're moving to Miami.
They need a big town. Yeah.
they're not going to be moving into Mar-a-Lago?
Well, Ivanka?
Yeah.
Ivanka,
oh.
they just bought, I don't know, like a $23 million home
A shack.
close to, and his brother, Jared's brother also bought a piece of property or a home near there. So that they're looking at schools. Ivanka and Jared are looking at schools in Miami for their children.
Oh, how nice.
Okay.
Poor Miami.
I don't know.
Florida.
Us.
Oh, thank God we live in Atlantic Beach. We just got to make it blue.
That's right. There's a nice manageable challenge.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thank you all for
Good
being
night,
here.
everybody.
And we'll see you in the new year. The new.
Elizabeth.
Have
Merry
a great
Christmas.
holiday.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy New Year.
Thanks to you all. And thank you for all the stats, you guys. That was a great presentation.
It's a
Yeah,
great
it was.
presentation.
Wonderful,
Hey,
wonderful
Carol.
presentation.
Carol and Steve. Night.
The bad.
Night.
All for truth.